何を求めて火の元に来たのじゃ。
To vanquish our common enemies.
Great to see you all. I have watched all 10 episodes of this epic series. You all must be beyond excited, first of all, because you worked on this. You were on set for like 10 months.
Yes.
Some 11.
It was quite long.
This is for you, Hiroyuki. Your character has been described as somebody who plays the long game, but you yourself as an actor have played the long game. You've been in this business since the 1960s, which I cannot believe. And here you are finally in 2024 able to tell this story as a producer and an actor. And not only is it epic in size, but the attention to detail is so incredible. So as a producer, finally being able to put your stamp on it and sort of show everybody what the right, make sure it's authentic to Japanese life in 1600. Like, how did you make sure as a producer you brought it to life?
We try to make authentic as much as possible because it's very important to introduce our culture to the world correctly. So this time we could hire Japanese crew with an expert for the samurai drama for each department: wig, props, costume, master of gesture, and we had a great team. And then great collaboration between Western crew and the Japanese crew working together. So it was like a dream team for me, and I really enjoy.
Anna and Cosmo, what was your first impression when you walked on set and you sort of saw the scope of it? Give me a little bit of virtual reality. Like, what were you seeing, smelling, touching? Like, it just felt like I wanted to live in that world, except for the violent part.
Yes. We don't want that. I just remember going on set and you can smell the tatami floor. And just with that alone, like, you're kind of transported to this very Japanese world, and wearing the kimono and having, all that weight on you, and that's kind of fixing your posture and the way you walk and the way you sit, and it changes the way you speak. I think all of it together really just made it very easy to feel like we were in 1600.
The manpower and the scale of what had been built and the efforts that had gone into manifesting the fiction into reality, and how many professionals were within so many different departments had built everything, and everything was just perfect. As far as the eye could see, plain of vision would be a village that had been built, or a town, or a castle. And the greens, the work that the greens did to make these trees and greenery, and the SFX team and what they had built, and just phenomenal effort all around.
Hiroyuki, from what I understand, I would love for you to talk about the translation process and the evolution of the script, because I understand that took years, like it was passed between an American team, Japanese team. Can you sort of go into a little bit more detail about that?
We tried to create the script, and then also translation for the Japanese. So many times back and forth. First of all, writer wrote the English version, and then go to translator, and then go to drama writer, and then go to the historical expert checking, and then come back, and then we check the dialogues and the matching for each character or situation, then retranslate to English, back to Justin, and then each actor has their own idea, so we should adjust on set as well. So yeah, it was a great experience, to create the
Well, I found myself watching it and thinking, especially with the scenes with the three of you, because I don't think I've ever seen a series before where one person is speaking in Japanese, the other person is speaking in English, and then there's a person who's speaking, Anna, your character, is speaking both. And so how does that change the dynamic of when you're actually shooting it as actors? Because you're taking in, like Cosmo, you're taking in what he's saying, but you need the translation first. So does that really complicate when you're shooting a scene? Did it take a while to sort of get into that rhythm?
Yes, but the time it took to get into the rhythm suited the narrative progression of how the three characters come to know each other and how they develop in that dynamic with regard to language. It happened in a way that suited the fiction.
And I thought it was really interesting how sometimes when you were translating, you didn't translate exactly. So was that a character motive? It was almost like you were giving the other person what they could handle.
Yes, absolutely. She is the translator and she's the only one who kind of understands both. And so if it seemed a little too negative, or, like she could just kind of manipulate it in a very not so intense way, like she can choose her words. So that was something very interesting to play with. And I feel like it was kind of hard, not because I had to wait for, the translation, but because I had to show that internally and then express it in different words. And so it was a little bit complicated. And then having to speak for two people and learning double the amount of lines was a bit of a challenge.
And sometimes make laugh, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
So fun. Great job.
If you could talk about, because there's so much, Cosmo, maybe your character not so much, because your character has no filter, it feels like. He sort of says exactly what he feels, and there's a lot of comic relief in your character because their stakes are so high. And then Anna, I could just watch your face and all that internal stuff that's going on with your character. I mean, it was just magnificent. And then Hiroyuki, you're so stoic, but there's so much going on. So I'm wondering for the scenes with the three of you, like, what do you think your character's main motive is?
For me, I'm really enjoying play with them, and during the session, I feel a lot, and then a lot of emotion coming in, but cannot show to the audience much. So that was a difficult point and interesting point for me. Yeah, I really enjoyed insight, up and down, like a jet coaster.
I think the motive for Mariko is, it's consistently shifting. So it's hard to say this is what her motive is. In the beginning, she's kind of aimless. Like she's just there. And then she slowly starts to open up to Blackthorne and she gets to know her lord, and her lord gives her information that she didn't know. And she begins to discover things and find her purpose. So I think her motive is just to kind of, I guess, serve her lord and then understand what she needs to do. Maybe.
I guess Blackthorne's kind of his motives also shift fairly frequently. There's a surface level of motivation that sort of makes itself apparent through what he says, and then there is a deeper one which remains secret until it isn't anymore. There's sort of a killing birds with stones attitude to him of if he can be useful, then he will appear to be useful, but only if it is assisting him in what he wants in the long term. Yeah. And so that was an interesting thing to play with.
Something that I was reading about was that at that time, it was called a cut and kill mentality. Like the fight sequences in this series are sometimes only 5 or 6 strokes, because at that time people were aiming to kill. And Hiroyuki, for you, coming from a movie like John Wick, where there's these very long extended fight sequences, can you kind of compare the two? Because even though the fight sequences are shorter in this one, you feel it. You feel like they're not messing around. So can you talk about the difference for you in those as a producer and an actor?
As a producer, I try to make scene, exciting, but not too much. Matching for drama, character, situation. Every single scene have to have own style, different style. So try to be careful, not showtime. It's a peak of drama. That's why we fight. So emotion is important. So try to make a best choreograph for each scene. As an actor, just have fun.
And for you had your character is interesting because on the surface, her movements are so graceful. I wanted to know from you, how you learned, because what I learned about women from that time period is they kept their knees together even when they were fighting, and they never bend over and they never crouch. And just what sort of process did you go through to learn all that?
We had so many lessons, but I think wearing the kimono really helped because it's kind of impossible to crouch because you're so, like, you have so much material here, and
Like
it's
concept, right?
yeah, you're
Yeah.
so wrapped in it that it makes it really impossible to do those movements that women didn't do. I think the hardest thing for me was standing up. Once you sit down, you're like nice and steady, and then you have to really use your thighs, and you can't put your hand on the ground and like get yourself up, you know? So just getting used to wearing that kimono and doing those movements was the hard part.
And the
Yeah.
walking too. I forget the word when women used to shuffle, because I actually,
Mhm.
what is it called?
Is there a name?
Suriashi,
Suriashi.
Yeah.
never up too much,
Yeah.
just touching the floor all the time or something, like a no theater play.
Hiroyuki, you insisted on real Japanese threads being used in the costumes. And it's fascinating that there was something like 80 to 125 costumers on set, and that it took 2 people to dress the samurais. Why was it so important to you to use Japanese threads? And maybe if also in Cosmo, you were in various states of undress. So it's almost like the juxtaposition of these very formal, and then how did sort of you being in various periods of undress sort of inform your character and sort of how he was different than the people he was facing?
You go.
Okay, the costume, the kimono, is a very important part of our culture, so must be wearing correctly. Even if the costume itself correct, how to wearing kimono is very important. That's why we needed a specialist and costumer for each character.
Blackthorne learns as things go on that the clothes he wears become more, I guess, formal. They begin comfortable, not restrictive at all, and then they gradually progress as his status, I suppose, improves in the culture. Obi gets tighter, and everything becomes more slightly more rigid. And it did take a long time to put them on and take them off.
Suits to you very well.
I also loved that he had zero filter, and some of the cuss words that you use to call some of the Japanese people that you meet along the way, like, I'm not going to repeat the word, but F smear was my favorite.
Oh,
Was
good.
any of that improvised, or was that in the script as well?
It was a subject of joy between Justin and Rachel, showrunners, and myself, and we would all experiment with ripping cussing from the books, and then maybe making up some, and then in the process of making up some, we would look at research the etymology of whether some of those concepts, those insulting concepts, were appropriate for the time period. So it was fun, but it came with work, and yes, some of them sometimes were improvised, and yeah,
Worked.
yeah.
It definitely worked. Hiroyuki, how would you describe to you the true samurai spirit? And do you feel like, now that you've seen the series, how do you feel the series captures the true samurai spirit?
The samurai itself means serve to someone. The kanji character means serve. So that kind of feeling is always carrying, and loyalty, sacrifice, patient, hard to oneself and then kind to others. That's a basic samurai spirit thing. But in this show, maybe role of Hiromatsu is showing a great example what the samurai is. So
Perfect example.
yeah.
I'm just curious, because you were on set for so many months. What were your trailers like towards the end? Were like your little mini homes? Like, what were each of your trailers like?
My trailer was rather clean.
Yours was, okay.
I think mine's actually smelt like incense, because I would light an incense every morning, and if I went back for the lunch break, I would do that. But it never really felt like home. I wish it did. What about
Yeah.
you guys?
Yeah, clean.
Clean.
But a lot of, supporters, taping stuff. So it's, something like a gym.
Blackthorns had detritus everywhere, consistently, and it was not clean.
I'm glad somebody's room wasn't clean. And last question, I sort of grew up, my parents loved the series Shōgun. They talked about the book endlessly. And the thing I remember from my childhood was the romance between Blackthorne and Mariko. And what I loved about this is that you didn't make it the central thing. In some series, you might see where it was all about the romance, but it felt very authentic. It felt like how that would really have been. So if you can maybe all sort of end on talking about making that sort of feel as authentic as possible.
You know, the connection that they had wasn't just romantic. They were connecting as human beings. And Mariko has this dual consciousness of being Catholic and being a samurai, and getting to know someone like Blackthorne was a breath of fresh air. And they connect on that level. And on top of that, you know, they were kind of attracted to each other. And so that happens. But the main thing is for this whole show is like the political aspects and the human, the grittiness, greed, loss, and love. And so I'm happy that they didn't really over fantasize that romantic relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with Anna. Like a lot of the archetypal themes that you said are the real focus of the novel and this adaptation, and I think that it's been handled well in terms of the priority of what is at the heart of this show. It remains those kinds of things: loyalty and duty and sacrifice and betrayal, and there are more important things.
Yeah, like these relationships, or the relationship between Blackthorne and Toranaga, that's just as important. So we wanted to highlight, you know, all the kinds of relationships in the story.